All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we've got Wheel of Time, season 2, episodes 5 through 7 to go over. I rewatched 5 and 7 last night. We had rewatched 6 when you were down here this weekend, and actually, you came just in time because since you left, it has been nonstop rain, and we had
Oh,
that wonderful day we were out fishing.
yeah.
Uh, that was nice and sunny and dry until the sun went down, and I had probably about 120 mosquito bites
I
from
had more than I thought I did. Yeah, I keep finding them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that was
So,
just in like 10 minutes of it being dark.
yeah, we weren't out there after dark very much because they stopped biting pretty quick once the sun went
Well, you
down.
caught that hard head, and then it was like,
Nothing. Yeah.
I think we should go in.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm trying to remember what happened in which episode, but my um kind of overall thought five uh five I don't remember very well because five was mostly inoffensive because it was mostly boring. um
I don't know.
i
I've
i
got I've got 3.5
yikes.
pages of notes. So,
I remember
okay.
six being
By the
more
way, it's also
obnoxious.
Sobertober. So, the first times I watched these, I had the benefit of a little bit of numbing agent, and last night I did not have that, so the notes were
Yeah,
flying a little bit more.
yeah. There's a scene in episode 7 that I think epitomizes the awfulness of the entire series.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it.
Okay.
And
If you're thinking about the scene that I thought was so horrible that I sent you the text about when I first watched it, we actually have to take our opinion back on that, and I will. It's from episode 5. The reason the scene was in episode 6, but the reason why
hmm,
I have to take my statement back that we haven't said on air, but I will be honest and say I misdiagnosed something in private, and
hmm,
I am willing to stand corrected. But episode 5 opens with actually a decent visual with all the money they're spending on this.
hmm,
When it pans over from the outside, from the sea looking in, it's like,
yeah,
hey, that actually looks good. And
yeah,
then they go right into a cheap set.
yeah.
And that's the problem with this. One of the big problems with this show for me is they're actually able to do a decent CGI kind of mixed visual from the outside. The White Tower is a good example of this. It actually looks good when they do the panned out views of it. But then you get on a set where the actors are, and it look you can tell it's in a warehouse with cheap buildings put up and made out of cardboard and probably plaster put up just so you can kind of see that it's a building, and you can almost see that they reuse some of these alleyways and these openings from scene to scene.
Um,
It's like the ways you could tell it was just a warehouse where they only lit up the spot they were on.
yes, the Ways was the most egregious one to me, and I believe my statement on it was it looked like the first few seasons of Star Trek. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
it
It,
it
and
it
remember, this
looked
is
like
like
that
1960.
with
Yeah.
with the plastic boulders and things. Even I've got it going in the background here, and even the opening of 5, it it's not a cheap set. It looks like they are actually outside, and they did actually construct um, this castle courtyard thing
Well, what I
that
mean by cheap
Turok is
set,
sitting in.
not necessarily that it's in a warehouse, but that you can tell by looking at it when you see the walls of the building and everything around
Yes.
that, you can tell there's no depth to it. You
Hmm.
could tell it's a facade. That's what
Yes.
I mean by cheap. If it actually looked like a building with depth, that would be different.
It doesn't look like it has depth. It's also very bland. because it's a facade that they mass produced and put up quickly. So one of the things that I like that's a relatively new thing in archaeology and in history is uh renewing old things so you can actually see what it looked like in the past. Because when we go through ruins, we think, wow, they lived really bored. No, all of these things had facades on them. They all had painting on them. They were all very colorful. Um,
I mean,
this is
you can
incredibly
see that in
boring.
modern day Germany, which is where I just got back
Yes.
from, because everything was bombed during the war. Like the big, massive churches and stuff, those were targets because it knocked down morale. And they actually have the pictures of what it looked like after it was bombed, and then the construction process to
Mhm.
renew it. So even though this building is technically built in 1300, it was built in 1960.
Yeah. So let's start with your notes then on five. And
I can't stand the actors playing Suroth. Very over the top, very overdone. Turok, to me, looks like he's probably potentially a good actor, but I think you just look at this whole episode, and we talk about the different directors and episodes,
mhm,
and everybody kind of has that like forcing words out of their mouth kind of persona to them,
yes.
and that's the way he came across to me.
The 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 big thing that jumped out at me with not just Suroth, but really all of the um oh, it's freaking uh I brain farted on his name. Ishi.
Mhm.
Ferris. One of the problems with him is he just shows how terrible everyone else is. So in the scene with and I don't know if he knows the source material, if he did any research when he got the role, or if he just instinctually knows what he should be doing here. He's the only one showing any real deference to Turok. He's acting like uh someone who is in the presence of someone who could kill you with the snap of not even the snap of a finger, just a flick of a wrist, and you're dead, right? He's the only one acting like that. The way Patton Fane comes waltzing in, it's what is this? Why are you dancing in like this? It's weird. It's out of place, and it takes
this is
away from the gravity of the situation.
this is part of the direction they went with Patton Fane, because at that point in the books, Patton Fane kept bouncing back and forth between
Mhm, mhm.
arrogant and deferent. And
Yeah.
he was actually shot down by Turok because he was overly arrogant. You
And then
could,
he goes back to being obsequious. Yeah.
yeah. And so you could see him walking in like that, but then Turok making a comment, or his speaker making a comment is
Uh-huh.
like, show some respect or something
Yes.
along those lines. And but then this is where they just tell you. I mean, they're just like, oh, I have something for, oh, the Horn of Valir. I'm like, it's the box. You haven't even opened the box yet. How do you know this is the Horn of Valir? There
Hmm.
is nothing in the legends that tells you what box it's in.
There
And
there's a lot of that, and we'll get to that because coming up in episode 6, I believe it was the bit that the biggest WTF moment is what you texted me, and it is pretty freaking egregious. But
it's
there's a
not,
lot of
because
that.
that's the one we have to take back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, but there's no, I still think it's pretty egregious because they just jump to things that they have not set up at all.
Hmm.
It's wait, how the heck does he know what's in that box? I mean, it is entirely conceivable, and in the book, that's how it is that this person who is a collector of old things and a noble, so very educated and all that, sure, he would know how to open this ancient box. So that part is in keeping with the books and makes sense with the character. How the hell does he know what's in it just by looking at the box?
Hmm.
How, and same thing with just jumping to let's just get it. All right, let's just keep going with your notes because
Is
the next
Landfear
scene,
Landfear insta healing? Yeah.
Lanfear insta healing,
Now, there's
and
two things about this scene.
ugh,
So we've already bitched and moaned about making the Forsaken kind of invincible is
mhm.
not the lore, because they could have been killed by a dagger just like everybody else. Uh, I'm almost wondering, first thing, if they might be combining some Gollum lore. here, because
that'd be weird.
this thing that would be very inconvenient to introduce to the series at this point, because it's just, it would be kind of random the way they've been doing things. If they might be introducing a little bit of that. But also the second one is when you see her eyes, it's showing the Saw, what their
Yeah,
representation of
yeah.
the Saw. And so they may be just separating what the true power can do versus.
And there's also kind of these black tendril things that come up from the ground that I think are supposed to be like the black cord that
Yeah,
connects to the men in the
and I
books.
think if that one is the right one, they need to have an explanatory moment of that,
Yes.
how the Dark One protects them in ways that normal people would not have their protection.
That was one of my gripes about, I can't remember if I said this last time when we were recording, when we talked about episode 4. No, because we hadn't got there yet. So the the title of episode 5 is Domine. They never explain what that means. I think you hear someone say it. I think
Well,
uh
you get a little mini explanation when Leandrin is arguing with Suroth about who's going to be bowing to who
yes, there's a
after
little bit about it
upon.
who's going to be bowing to
Yeah.
who, and I think Rena says leashed. I think she uses the term leashed one once, but it's, if you have not read the books, I really am curious for people who haven't read the books what you think when you see these things, because there's no explanation to it. So just like with the dark, there needs to be some kind of explanation that this is the Dark One's power. He is, I mean, for crying, you could just call him the Lord of the Grave a few times. Make sure you have established that death is his domain. And that would be enough, I think, to let the audience infer what is happening here. They don't do it. They don't really establish what it means, what the word domine means in this episode, so that you know, oh, they literally think of you like a dog. That is what you are. You are like a dog who is not rabid, but potentially and dangerous. You need to be leashed because you need to be controlled, just like you would control a war dog.
And then after she heals herself, we jump to Moiraine, and we just get a sequence of events that's supposed to show Moiraine's willingness to do anything,
Yeah.
her dedication to the purpose being Rand, which she really hasn't even explained all the way. The little bit of Varen tidbits kind of throw some stuff in for us coming up, but it's get they never flesh out her mission to bring Rand to the last battle, or even what her plan to do it is. All you get is her being an uppity little bitch running away from Lan and killing people and horses, and it's
Right.
using a poor little stable woman as bait against one of the most dangerous people in the history of the world.
That scene, I didn't even think about this when we were ranting about it, and it just kind of dawned on me that this scene here perfectly mirrors my rant when they killed Uno. That was supposed to be shocking, but it wasn't, because you hadn't established who he was. You had not connected the audience to this character unless you'd read the books. And even then, if you'd read the books, you're probably not that connected, because he's not the same character. He's you can see who he's supposed to be, but he's not actually him yet, because you haven't taken the time to establish it. Same thing here. Her cutting the horse's throat is supposed to shock you, okay? Except it doesn't, because one, you've kind of already established that, to your point, not so much that Moiraine would do anything to achieve her mission, but that she's a bitch. She is a queen bee, and so this isn't that shocking. And you're going to undo it here in the next few episodes, in these scenes where she suddenly becomes emotional and uncertain of herself.
Well, this is partly inexperience of writers. These are people who actually go to college to become a writer now, instead of creative apprenticeships and the way it used to be done back in the day. Clifton Duncan has a nice rant on this,
Hmm.
talking about how they're basically going to an indoctrination school for 16 years instead of an organic process, which actually weeds in the good writers, but also you get life experience along the way.
Exactly.
You're not taking student loans and eating healthy and getting fat. You are living in your car trying to give scripts to the local director in Hollywood, that kind of thing. But also, when we're talking about the mission, we're talking about what Moiraine is supposed to be. She had it a little bit hard out of the White Tower in New Spring,
Hmm.
and she had to learn a lot of things the hard way, including don't take Lan's sword from him. Those even that scene is so memorable because it's her inexperience showing through, and then she learns from it. And these writers don't understand that. It would actually behoove them to have a few special forces people in there and say, what's it like to achieve a mission, even though there's bad things that happen along the way? Don't tell me the details. Just say how you overcame doing that bad thing because the mission was greater to save the world. And they don't have that perspective. They're people just speculating about that perspective.
Hmm.
I don't even have that perspective, but I got it better than them.
I mean, heck, just watch some freaking videos on YouTube. I went down a rabbit hole a while ago and I don't even remember how I found it. And so I can't remember the name of the channel, but there's a channel that's a couple of former Green Berets. And they do different things. Like they'll talk about selection. So this is what you need to do to get ready. And one of the things they do is they'll watch war movies and they'll talk about them. And just watching these two talk about Lone Survivor and the scene where the SEAL team, it's just the four of them, and they're just supposed to be on a recon mission, and now you're foobarred because here you've found these shepherds have stumbled onto you. What do you do about it? And you're screwed, and you have no good choices. And and so no matter what you do here, there's going to be a bad outcome. So which bad outcome do you have to choose?
So back to the writers and their lack of perspective, think of modern uh the modern relationship scene, whether it's friends or dating. What did Moiraine do when Lan was trying to help but was inconvenient to the way she wanted to do it?
Hmm.
She ghosted him.
Hmm. That's a good point.
She ghosted him. She didn't deal with the relationship. She didn't argue her point. She didn't bring people to the table that could help and try to develop something. She just ghosted. She just was a bitch and left and said, I'm going to do it my way. This is how these people treat relationships, probably.
That's a really good point, especially if you've read the books and you've been following along. We
Don't
spent a
worry, I'm going to get more problematic than this coming
oh
forward. I
goody.
actually have notes that say, "Uh-oh, canceled. Uh-oh, canceled."
But so contrast this with a pretty short chapter that we spent a lot of time on when we did our reread of The Great Hunt, which is the scene with it's one of the few times you actually see Moiraine in the whole book. And it's with she's with I keep wanting to say Varen, but it's Van Deen and Adelaus, and she's kind of poking and prodding Lan because
Mm-hmm.
he's restless because Moraine's not sharing with him what's going on here, but he's not going anywhere because he's with her to the end. And she's not pushing him away, she's just cleverly manipulating him.
Well, and she's also prodding because she does need to
Yes.
know where he stands because
Yes.
she has let him be somewhat independent in their whole time together, and she needed to know that he was going to be there in the bitter end. And you got that from her. You didn't
So
get just you're in my way, put up or shut up or get out.
yes. Yeah, exactly. So you have a writer who has real life experience, a lot of real life experience, and he's able to craft this scene where she is able to kind of prod him in the direction she wants him to go, but also feel out to make sure he still stands where with her, wholly with her, because she can tell he's already starting to drift towards Nynaeve and to the boy to Rand. So she needs to to do all these things in a way that doesn't clue him into what she's doing. But you had a writer who was able to do that. Um, so I don't know if you've watched any of the people ranting about the Ahsoka series on Disney Plus.
I've never even
Um,
heard of it.
yeah, there's a lot of people like that. Well, I've
Oh,
heard
is
of
that
it.
the new Star Wars thing with the
It's the new
okay.
Star Wars series. So they bring in a character that was introduced way back in the mid 90s when the expanded universe first started. It was literally the first books that were written in the post Star Wars world. And this guy, Timothy Zahn, who's an incredible sci-fi writer, and he created basically a kind of Sherlock Holmes character. The problem with a Sherlock Holmes type character is when you have someone whose only power is they're incredibly intelligent, you'd better be pretty damn smart yourself, or you're not going to be able to pull that off. And that was my thinking just seeing the previews for this show is, wait a minute, this character's power is that he's way more clever than anyone else around. And he was able to bring the New Republic to its knees just off of sheer brilliance. How the heck are modern writers going to pull that off? Well, apparently they're not, because I was listening to someone called Little Platoon. He was on Drinkers After Hours, and he said that this character is how did he put it? It son of a gun. I forgot I had a second phone here. Shut up.
Is the alert going off? It's 2 minutes early.
That was yeah, I forgot I had a work phone sitting here that was on. So anyway, where is oh yes. So Thrawn, this character is a stupid person's idea of what a smart person is. Because they don't know. It's like my rant about uh video game uh, uh Mass Effect and the way they wrote relationships and it's like, oh, this is fan fiction because you poor nerds don't know what a real relationship is like. That's why this feels off. All right, tangent over.
Yeah, we got to move on because we've got 3 episodes to get through, and now we. Okay, so before moving on, this is where I think just flipping some scenes might have actually helped because they did the killing the horse, everybody going off. Lanfear sees the guy and gets his horse, blows his head up. Well, that's fine. That's
Mm-hmm.
shock value. Ooh, blew his head up, and I'm like, that's the way to go because you don't feel anything, but whatever. Then they have Rand and Moiraine walking in the woods, talking about it, which the other girl's not there. And then they show Lanfear coming up on the lady with the horses and learning about her supposed to throw off the trail and tapes her mouth shut with the power. If they should have shown that scene before Rand and Moiraine walking through the woods,
Mm-hmm.
because you could have had Lanfear coming up on it, discovering the deception, and then just go to the conversation with Rand and Moiraine. You already knew that they weren't with the other girl before they had the Lanfear scene. So the flipping of those two scenes would have changed a lot of the dynamic right there. But it is what it is. But then we get to Perrin with Elias, and Perrin finding out Elias had basically backtracked them and is taking him away from his friends. And Perrin challenges Elias. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't like the delivery, as I've complained about the Perrin actor multiple times. Challenges him, but then the wolf pack comes forward aggressively at Perrin. No, that's not how wolves work.
Mm-hmm.
Perrin challenging Elias would have been a challenge for the alpha spot.
Yep. It's sit back and
They
see. All
wouldn't
right,
have
how's this
stopped
going to
him.
work?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
he was at that point no longer an outside threat. He wasn't a human coming to hunt them. He was another wolf in the pack.
And they'd already kind of established that because the wolves are starting to talk to him. He's starting to figure out, oh, that's what these images are, is that's them talking to me.
But so that I didn't like the way they handled that because he backed down because all the wolves were coming up to him. I'm like, no, they should have let it go, and someone would have backed down or not. So that was kind of dumb to me. But then he goes into town.
Well, hold on, but before it makes me curious if we're already done with Elias, because I mean, who knows? Because there's no consistency with with writers today. It's just whatever is needed and convenient at the time. But it is again, I as much as possible, I try to criticize within the show itself. So set aside that this is completely not in keeping with Elias's character in the books. When you established the character at the beginning of the season, you established him as someone Ingtar, someone the Shinarans knew, someone they had worked with before, and he's just going to leave them all.
Yeah, and this is I think he's going to come back in the last episode. Perrin's going to get in a bind,
Mm.
and there's going to be a moment where Elias and the wolves show back up, and he says, I told you you're not alone," or something along those lines. Uh, I can see that happening. If it doesn't, I mean, they didn't really set up for it to happen, but they also left it open for it to
The,
happen.
the other problem with the scene is they don't bother to take the time to establish a building of a relationship with Hopper. So why does he follow Perrin? Why does he? That's a big effing deal to leave your pack.
There's one campfire talk where he tells him his name.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And this is a trope that I'm noticing more and more is the, oh, I like this person. Oh, I like this one. You know, you saw it in the Marvel movies quite a bit towards the end there when they started to get awful. And this they do that here is rather than showing you that Hopper likes Perrin and Hopper has a bond with Perrin and why that is, they just have Elias say, "Oh, he likes you." Why? And why so much that Hopper will leave the pack? Not just leave the pack, but leave it to go do something dangerous. The pack doesn't want Perrin to go, and especially doesn't want Perrin to go here because it's dangerous. It's certain death as far as they're concerned. So why the hell does Hopper go? They don't bother to establish it.
No.
I will say in occasionally there are good things, and this is one of those times where I think it works. I think introducing the younger Bornhold here
Yeah, that
and
was my
having
next. Yeah.
I think that works. That helps establish, especially if you're actually trying to set up what happens in the Shadow Rising, that having that stronger connection, that direct connection between Perrin and Dane Bornhold, um, it will make that stronger if they're actually doing that and the show survives that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought the acting was okay with the younger Bornhold. Never been a fan of the guy who plays Valda, so it kind of threw everything off. But the other important note about this whole sequence here is
Hold
it's
on,
obvious.
he
Oh, go ahead.
started good. I remember us liking him when we first saw him,
The
and then
very first scene,
yes,
but then
but then
after that, it got
he becomes a cartoon villain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what he is here. He basically becomes a cartoon villain.
Uh, but the obvious combining of Avienda and Gaul is, I mean, it makes sense somewhat from an adaptation standpoint.
Yeah.
I just think they missed something here because Gaul is kind of like the Boba Fett of Wheel of Time with a lot of fans. You had that chance to have that character that a lot of the book fans really like, even though he's so minor.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, I don't think it would have been hard to write him likable. So even these writers might have been able to pull it off to write a likable Gaul here.
I just had a thought here. All right, so uh, several episodes back, I postulated that one of the problems with the youth of today is they get into this negative feedback loop of narcissism because the what you have to come to terms with when you have social anxiety is you think everyone's looking at you. They're not. They have their own lives to live. Nobody cares about you except that, the Dunbar number around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those people care about you. That's why they're your five. Everyone else is busy with their own life, but for the modern youth, they want everyone looking at them. So that's just going to make it worse rather than helping you get over it because why aren't they looking at me? Notice me, notice me, notice me. Is that why modern young writers have no ability to write a mentor?
Hmm.
Because one of the reasons Gaul works so well and is so necessary for Perrin's story arc is because he is something of a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though he's not that much older than Perrin, he has much more life experience than Perrin. Because Perrin just now left his little bubble. You know, the Two Rivers was an idyllic place where nothing ever happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Gaul comes from the threefold land. You know, it's where sleep well and wake is their way of saying sweet dreams, right? So Gaul is completely missing, and I don't think they understand why he's important because of that. He helps Perrin grow. Same thing. We're coming up on when we get to it in episode 7, what I think is one of the most egregious scenes, and it has to do with when Lan is taking taking Rand to the Amarillan, and they try and cram that scene in from the book, but it doesn't work because they've
Oh, I've
never
got lots of
established
thoughts about that scene,
exactly.
so we'll get to
But
that one.
one of the reasons it's so terrible is because they're trying to have this on the cheap. They want this scene that's really impactful that fans love from the books, but they don't understand the reason it's so impactful is because Jordan took the time from the very beginning to establish Lan as a mentor to all three boys, but especially to Rand. They don't understand how to write a mentor because I don't know that they've ever really had one because they're so damn narcissistic they don't think they need one. How dare you tell me what to do? How dare you tell me how to live my life? That's what mentors are for. But if you're so up your own ass, you would resent a mentor rather than learning from one.
All right, so we come back to that, but speaking of mentors, we get to Leandrin next talking to Nynaeve. And she
Mm-hmm.
gives a nice long speech, and she, again, one of the best deliverers of lines in the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
She gives a nice little speech about the three oaths and an allusion to the Hawkwing invasion of the tower and the siege and everything. Although she doesn't use the name Hawkwing, if you read the books, you know that that's what she's
Mm-hmm.
talking about, and that's the birth of the three oaths. And then she gives a little speech about how afraid men are of, and my comment, this is the first we get as canceled comment, isn't it funny that the reason for the three oaths is because men are worried about women lying? The greatest weapon of women is lying. And I forgot to do it, but I meant to have all those research articles that we brought up about infidelity and how when they actually made it to where women couldn't lie, the numbers evened out. Women use
I forgot about
deception
this.
as a
Yes.
weapon.
Yes.
This is why people like Andrew Tate have a place in this world,
Mm.
because it is a legitimate concern for men that they're constantly being manipulated. And we're going to get to an instance where they actually overtly say, and this is in the Swan and Rand speech, why that's important. There are so many self-owns by the progressives that wrote this that it's actually cracking me up when I see it. And I'm actually, there's so many of them. I'm wondering if there's someone on the inside saying, let's say the quiet part out loud to see if anybody catches it. And
Well,
this is
but
one of
we've
them, because she's
yes.
just saying, yeah, we had to just like do something with the power to make sure we couldn't lie, to make people trust us because we're powerful women.
Um, before we get to that scene though, I just want to point out that Katie Leung is smoking hot, and there's something about a Asian with a Scottish accent that makes her even hotter.
Who's
But
that?
I digress. Uh, one of the Browns that Varen goes to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She is pretty cool. Yeah.
Um. Anyway, but I digress. So that was my big thought on that scene. So I mentioned this to you, but I don't know how sober you were and if you remember it. There's a reason why women use deception, but if you don't understand where it comes from,
Yeah, because unlike Avienda, oh, we're about to get to Avienda fighting White Cloaks, women can't just punch you in the face and knock you down for the most part. So they have to use their words and their wits
something
and their
something that
boobs.
something that Robert Jordan got in a lot of trouble for is
Later,
mentioning that
post fame, he got in
yes,
trouble
when he was
for
already
because
in trouble.
the movements.
There
that
there is an inherent, I don't remember exactly how he put it, but in interactions between men, especially young men, there is an inherent threat of violence. An inherent, often even subconscious threat of violence, because that's just part of our nature. Women cannot compete with that and not get smashed physically. So they use a different tool because they think differently than we do. So it's easier for them to slip in that deceptive role. So I mean I haven't finished it yet, but so far the One Piece live action adaptation lives up to the hype. And there's a scene in it that blew me away because how are you allowed to write that in this day and age? And there's this character named Zoro, and he is this incredible swordsman, and it's his life goal since he was a child to be the greatest swordsman ever. And he has this one student in his dojo that he cannot beat, that is his rival. Turns out she takes off the kendo helmet, and it's a girl. Well, of course it's a girl because it's modern day. Oh no, no. But then the girl says something that was astounding to me. She tells him, "Well, of course I can beat you now, but eventually you're going to grow up and you're going to be bigger and stronger and faster, and I won't be able to beat you." And she says, this is pretty much a direct quote, "A girl can beat a boy, but a woman can never beat a man." And I said, "Holy crap, how are you allowed to say that?" But then they triple inverted it and subverted your expectations, because then Zoro comes back and basically says, "Don't use that as an excuse. No, you and me are going to do extra training together and push each other because we both want to be the greatest swordsman ever. But I'm giving up because I can't beat you now, and you're being a defeatist because you know you can't beat me in the future. We're going to keep each other from using those excuses, and we're going to push each other to be better." And they don't say just because you're a girl doesn't mean you can be the bestest ever. They just say don't use it as an excuse and push yourself.
and this is one of the holes in the male to female trans argument in sports, because we get Hollywood and we get the whole progressive fantasy land of a girl can do anything a guy can do better, and you get things like Rings of Power and the new Peter Pan, where Wendy can fight off all these pirates with her bare hands and a sword without any training to speak of. All of these instances. But then the argument when you talk trans, male to female trans participants in sports is, oh, they're on puberty blockers, they're doing this, and they're. Why would they need puberty blockers and all of these things if women can do this?
Mm-hmm.
So they're already eating their own tail with these arguments, because yes, we can write this strong. What do you care? Women can be this strong. Women can, a heavyweight woman boxer can box, Floyd Mayweather, or he's not heavyweight, Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
It When it's not true, and they don't understand why we can't even put our imaginations to make it true because it's so far from reality. But then
Mm-hmm.
they have the same argument of, well, they're on all these blockers and their testosterone levels are lower and everything. It's like, well, which one is true? The
All right.
one that
So
they can compete at that level no matter what, or the one where you have to level the playing field using drugs?
so put a pin in that because we're about to get to the scene with Avienda and Perrin fighting the White Cloaks. But
Yeah, we
before
got
that,
one
there's that
before that. We got Ishii and Lanfear.
uh Suroth.
Oh, Ishii and Suroth. Yeah, Ishii and Suroth. Yeah. Uh, I don't like
Does
this. I don't like this one, even though Ferris is a good actor. I don't even think he did even act this well because it was so forced. He
Yeah.
basically tells you the end of the movie or end of the show, which is the end of book two. And there's when in the book you saw a couple prophecies and you saw it happen, and then they talked about it as a big deal.
So
And we could have
com
had that still. There was no there's no adaptation reason for having this speech.
compare and contrast a scene that's coming up here that is really good, which is when Lanfear goes to Leandrin. And again, uh Ferris and I can't remember Leandrin, I can't remember the actress's name. They're I mean they're basically carrying the show. and she does a phenomenal job acting that scene.
Well, and Lanfear's good too.
Uh-huh.
O'Keefe, I can't remember her first name.
Yeah.
Uh,
D what the hell is going on in this scene with Suroth? And my first thought was, does Suroth not know not know who this is? Because there are times where
no, she
the
says in
chosen,
that conversation she knows who he is.
yes,
Yeah.
and that was my first thought, and then she says something in there that reveals that no, she knows he's one of the chosen. Then why the hell are you acting? This is even worse than the way she acts around Turok, because she is also of the high blood. So even though he's above her, she still has an amount of station
Because the
relative to
actress and the
his.
people who wrote her script grew up on Disney shows where the kids could talk back to the adults without having any repercussions.
That's an incredibly good point.
That's exactly what it is.
That is exactly what that is. And even with Ferris's ability here, he can't even save this scene because it's so awkward. It's so bad.
Yeah,
He,
and I think that's partly what he has to do there in the scene is basically just say, this is what's going to happen at the end of all of this.
and it's just utterly bizarre. And again, it's even worse because we're going to get an actually a really good scene here in a little bit with Leandrin and Lanfear, and it's just going to remind you of how awkward and weird this is.
Then we go back to Perrin, and I don't think we need to dwell on it too much because
No, but I was just going to say to your point about, you know, how women and men are physically different. Again, within the context of the show, within its own world, you've already ruined this scene with crap. I forget I just brain farted on Rand's mother's name. But
oh, uh,
now they eventually
Carrie.
took, yes, they eventually took that too far. No, Carrie was his adoptive mother, his
Oh,
birth mother.
oh yeah,
Um
Shalom,
Shalon, I
Shalon,
think.
yeah,
Yeah. Um they eventually
formerly
took that
Tigraine.
they eventually took that too far and it got a little cartoonish, but for the most part, that was one of the few things we praised in that first season because she doesn't fight them standing up. And and she's injured and heavily pregnant, so she keeps, you know, like she'll do a move and then it's you know, doubling over in pain. Like the first guy she defeats, it's because, oh, big 200-pound man, little injured girl, he just goes charging at her and she uses his momentum against it. He uses his momentum and his arrogance against him. They completely ignore all of that in this scene, and Avienda just straight up, you know, gets in the ring against Mike Tyson and punch
Not
him
only
straight in the
that, this
face.
is this is where they say if you know physics, you hate action movies. If you've actually ever trained and fought, okay, not just doing forms and kata. I mean, like trained and fought in real life. There were so many ways she beat a white cloak that I'm like, there is no way. Even if you were the mountain, that move wouldn't have worked against that guy. It was just physically impossible. There was when what's my cue when you do deadlifts? That changes everything. Push the floor. Don't pull the
Oh,
weight,
yes.
right? Push
Yes.
the floor. It's physics. You push the floor, the earth is bigger and stronger, whatever everything else moves but the earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were things where the only thing for the push to happen against was the air behind her. And that doesn't work when you have a 200-pound, 220-pound guy being pushed against who has feet on the ground. You need, I mean, unless she's using the power where she's creating a wall of air behind her foot. It wasn't even a swing. She would put her foot there and then flip him in a different direction. I'm just like, no, this is not how this works. This is
Mm-hmm.
not even, this is worse than WWE action. And
Yeah.
it was one of the worst fight scenes I'd ever seen. That's nuts and bolts my opinion on that.
And add to that, first off, at the very beginning of the fight scene, Bornhold says, you know, rush her all at once, or she'll
And then
take,
they come at her one at a time.
and then
Yeah.
they come out of one at a time. Well, and
It's like the old Power Ranger scenes where the goobies are in the background going like this while one is fighting at
exactly.
a time. Yeah.
But you could kind of tell they're stealing this from the book, but they don't understand it. Is that's kind of what happens in the book scene with Gaul, but he rushes at one of them, and Jordan makes it clear that he catches them off guard with his sudden movement, so that they aren't able to surround him and attack him all at once. But then the second part is adding to the absurdness of what Avienda does here. Perrin never really does anything in this fight.
And then she later compliments him on his dancing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
He didn't do anything. It it was it was worse than the Black Widow scene. I've referenced this before, but I love that Black Widow scene in Iron Man 2, and you've got Happy in the background there boxing this guy. And it's funny because Black Widow's taking on like 6 guys at once, but they do it in a clever way so it works. But it's not like Happy's doing nothing. It's just embarrassing compared to what Black Widow does. I mean, he does beat his guy, at least. Perrin doesn't do anything.
Okay, so 3 things. The horrible fight scene. Avienda, what you just described with Avienda, and the third thing is you completely removed any opportunity to make Dane a formidable antagonist by
Mm-hmm.
having Avienda not only kick all his people's ass, but him in particular very easily, and Perrin stop her by saying,
Yep.
wait. It would have been so much better to have a stalemate there and Dane still be a formidable antagonist going forward.
Also, where the hell is Perrin's axe? I thought he was going to take his axe. I thought, oh, that's why Bornhold is wielding an axe here, is because
That's a
Perrin's
good
going to
point. I
take
didn't
it.
even think of that. But okay, so let's rewind a second before the fight, because Perrin opens the cage for her and they
Mm-hmm.
have a little dialogue back and forth. And this is what this is. I'm gonna bitch and moan about the actor playing Perrin the whole time because he never gets better. In fact, he keeps getting
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
They actually wrote a good sequence for him and he didn't pull it off. One
Mm.
line he couldn't pull off. He says people shouldn't be in cages.
Yeah.
But he did it in his normal mouth breather. I'm confused where I'm at. I'm a little depressed and da 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 kind of way of doing it, where the real Perrin would have said that exact same line. The real Perrin, the book series Perrin would have said the exact same line, but said it in a way that was like, yeah, dummy. That just makes sense. It would have been just that matter of fact thing that the simple but intelligent Perrin would have said, whereas this guy just kind of whined it out.
You also have something established there that I hadn't really thought of before. Um, I don't think I thought of this and talked about it when we were doing our reread. Is Jordan had established already that this is this is why Perrin is the wolf, when in certain ways it doesn't make sense because he's not instinctual. He is a thinker, but you can kind of see that part of him, that calling to him, that no, you and then what happens, is it right before or right after when he meets the guy who's gone nuts and he breaks open the lock? I don't remember which, if it was right before or right after.
Oh, that
No, it's before, because
it's
they have
before,
to run
yeah.
to the ship there. So he's already established that with that too, is he shouldn't be in a cage. This is no way to live. So they
Mm-hmm.
had that softer, it was the same moment, but it was a softer establishing thing about Perrin's character that they
Well,
had
and
already
this is why the slog is probably an important part of the book series, but it's the most annoying
done.
because Perrin is justice.
Yeah.
People shouldn't be in cages. That's not right. Perrin is justice. And what we see in the slog is he just completely abandons that because Fail.
Mm-hmm.
He abandons justice because he's emotionally charged.
Good point.
And I think I get, if you look at it from that perspective, the slog isn't so bad, but I think that was the poorest writing that Jordan did in the whole series,
Yeah.
because you can see the point and it's still hard to get through.
Uh,
Uh,
I, mm,
yeah, we'll save that for the book series because we got plenty of slog to come. Then we get to, oh, this is where Moiraine and Rand get back to Karheim. And this is another place where to me, there's no scale because they just did several days worth of travel, but they're just now talking about don't go to sleep. And because when Rand and Celine, before she was revealed as a Lanfear, even though we all knew, uh, went out to the place she wanted to take him to, they talked about traveling for days. And so we know it took days to get back. And so they didn't sleep for 3 days. Well, how's that working for you? You know,
that's a good
that's
point.
about the time you start going crazy, by the way. And what we know from very no IRB approval Russian studies from back in the Stalinistic days where they just used prisoners to do these things. About 5 days is when you start ripping yourself apart and eating your own intestines. So 3 days is a long time to go without sleep.
Yeah. Um, I don't have any thoughts on this scene here, except that I just happened to pause on something bizarre, which is the shot of Rand and Moiraine walking away, walking towards the family home, and I hadn't noticed this before. Moiraine has her dagger strapped to her back.
Which she theoretically left in.
No, no, no. This is because someone thinks this makes her look badass, but it
Oh,
looks cartoonish, especially compared to, Rosamund Pike. The top of her head comes up to about Rand's shoulder, which, you know, it's even more of a contrast in the books, but still it gives the point this is a diminutive woman, and and it just looks silly to have this little dagger, and then Rand has this big sword strapped to his back. Is one, why would anyone ever do that? That's a silly place to put that. And two, it doesn't make you look like a warrior. It makes you look like a child pretending.
mm-hmm.
It's stupid. Ugh. All right.
And we get
Did you
back to the tower. Varen confronts Sheriam, and this scene to me is a moment of the directors and writers not trusting the audience, because in order to make you think that Sheriam is not on the up and up, they made her look stupid. It was so over. It
did
was cartoony,
yes.
and I know they're trying to play to the comes up later since everybody's watched the episode. I'm not going to be a spoiler here that it was probably compulsion, but at the same time, there was no nuance to it. It was just like Sheeran was like a cartoon. It was like out of a Harry Potter movie where it's actually meant for young adults and kids.
Yeah.
This was not an adult audience moment.
No. This is this is incredibly inept writing because Sheriam is incredibly inept here. It is
Mm-hmm.
she is either so bad at being bad that she's left this gaping obvious clue, or she's so dumb she doesn't realize she was manipulated. It's one of the two.
They try to cover it later by saying uh she spoke that as if she wrote the thing and everything, so it must have been the compulsion or whatever. But even still, post hoc compulsion, you would see this thing that you didn't do and be like, when did I
there
do that?
there should have been you can kind of see where I think they were trying to show that, but the writing was terrible, and either the actress wasn't good enough to pull it off or didn't know what she was supposed to do, because the writing was so terrible, and if she didn't have the background of the world, of the source material, then she wouldn't know I'm supposed to be confused here.
Mm-hmm.
Because um and then again, this is another the end of this scene is another time where they just say something that they don't bother to establish. They just use the word, ooh, compulsion, and then there's almost a dun dun dun. You can almost hear that playing. They might as well have used that sound effect because it was so, they were hanging a hat on it so egregiously. But
Well, this one I'm not gonna bust balls about because I mean just the word compulsion is pretty self-explanatory. And I'm always trying to take this from a perspective of being sensitive to fitting 14 books in a TV series. So that one I don't mind as much if they had pulled off the scene before better.
If they had pulled it off before, and
Yeah.
if they just would have had just a very brief explainer there, because they go straight from compulsion to dark friend, black Aja. They could have said something about it being a forbidden weave, and for good reason.
Well, but you can, yeah, you can argue compulsion is using it as a weapon. Compulsion is a weapon, and you could, like
That
you
would have
said, you
been a
could,
better way to, it's a weapon against someone's mind.
yeah,
That
you could have had one quick line in there that manipulating someone's mind as a weapon, so she would have had to break the three oaths.
yeah.
Yeah, and you just extended that one little line, 3 seconds.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's they want the payoffs, but they either don't want to or don't know how to have the setup.
But then we get a decent segue. We get, okay, give me whoever's left the tower and so long, and then it pans to Leandrin taking the girls
Mm-hmm.
to Suroth. Uh, this is where they have their little banter, which I think answered some of your question about explaining what Domine are, where she talks about Marath Domine and how they will all be leashed at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a matter of time. And then Leandrin spits back and gets all pissed off, and then breaks the rules by channeling to free Nynaeve. But my problem here is, I mean, I guess from a show standpoint, if you've only watched the show and you've never read the books, I'm, then they haven't really established that you can just, no, they have established you can feel somebody channeling, because that's how they found the yellow in
Mm-hmm.
the which I, oh no, that happens in the next episode.
They could have simply, I mean, they show the
Well,
weaves
but
when they want to, and they don't show them when you need to. If they would have just shown that she was holding the power when she came out, because
yeah,
that obviously to protect herself, this is,
but
just
she actively channeled though with a Domine right there, and the Domine doesn't do anything. And the Domine we've been shown to be able to pick people out of the crowd that can channel. So, and
if
then in
they
the
would
next
have,
episode, they
no,
tell us you can feel somebody channeling. So there's no continuity here. But
if
so,
they would have just had a line where one of the Soldam lets her know that she's holding the power, she's a Molrath Domine, and Surath tells her to shut up and you know don't worry about it, then you would have had plausible deniability, because she could have masked what she was doing by the fact she was already holding the power.
mm-hmm. And so they get free. Egwene gets caught. Uh, and then we get to a scene of Ishii again, where this is the Ishii Lanfear scene, where Lanfear tricks him into thinking he's in a dream with Rand, but then he calls her on it. But I don't understand why the gay moment before he calls her on it, where they try to imply that he already knew it was Lanfear or what, I don't know. It was very awkwardly done. But then she asks him about the girls, and he brings up Lanfear or Leandrin bringing the girls to him, and he makes a comment. One craves power and the other refuses it, and that's obviously about Egwene and Nynaeve. And I want your opinion here, because I'm assuming he's saying Egwene craves the power and Nynaeve refuses it,
Mm-hmm.
because that's part of her block. She refuses to
Yes.
acknowledge that she is this person. But the craving the power, I mean, could this be a statement that reflecting what a lot of us feel as the fans, that Egwene is power hungry uh and a tyrant, or was it just that she's eager to learn? Because the way Ishii says it was in the way of, I have these people. It follows up on him saying that Matt is already his, Perrin is becoming the wolf, and he'll fight Rand. So it's in the
It,
same boat. It's talking
yeah.
about it in the same way. And I'm wondering what these thoughts on Egwene are. When
In the context of that scene and the series, it makes me wonder if what he's saying there is that she's corruptible, and that they're going to invent scenes to parallel Rand because there is a bit of a parallel there in the books with Rand and Egwene, and are they going to invent some scenes of Ishamael trying to corrupt Egwene as well because
Mhm.
she's so important and because she's so powerful?
Okay, so let's put a pin in that one because that's a lot of speculative, and
Hmm.
we're already almost at an hour here, or we're a little over an hour because we started a little before 1. Okay, so this is the scene that makes the WTF scene not as WTF. When we get back to Turok and Ishi, and Turok gives him one request, and he
Hmm.
says, "Well, I want you to accept this gift from Suroth," and he brings out Egwene.
Hmm.
Loyal and Ingtar are standing right there.
Okay, yeah.
So
I've got
that's
yeah,
how
I've got
they
it now.
knew Egwene was there. So that makes that other scene make more sense.
Okay. So that does make a little more sense. It still is
Forced.
it
But
still is forced, and it's still a little awkward that he cares so much because they didn't bother to establish how long they had been together and what all they'd been through.
again, that's the scale. They're horrible at scale.
Hmm.
I mean, we can assume that the travel to the Waygate to the Eye of the World, or to Faldara to the events that led to the Eye of the World could have been a long time. But we're having to assume that. We didn't even get the benefit of the 3 months later we got in episode 3 of
Hmm.
the first series. So it's you're leaving a lot to assumption, but just the fact that he knew Egwene was there that we didn't catch the first time. Loyal and Ingtar were present when Egwene was unveiled and then leashed for the first time.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And then my last thing is we get a scene with Rand and Moiraine, and she convinces him it's okay to go to sleep. Eventually, you're gonna have to confront her, and he lays down. And my my comment on this, especially since I was watching it in the evening and without a sleepy time drink, was, "Wow, he fell asleep quick. I wish I could fall asleep like that."
I wish I had that superpower.
Yeah, fully
Yeah.
clothed with someone else sitting
Well,
right there with the lights on, and he just lays
but
back and
this is what I was one of the things I was referencing when I talked about the horse scene is that all right, you wanted this shocking scene of her killing this horse, um, because that is especially to modern Western comfortable sensibilities, killing an animal is often more shocking than killing a person. Um, there's I don't remember the name of. There's a website, the only purpose of which is to let you know if the dog dies. If there's a dog in a movie and does it die, because there are people who want to know that because they don't want to have to see it. So,
which is why we were given a disservice in this series by never having a Bella. That would be like having the dog
yes, that's a good
in the
point.
show.
Well, they do have Hopper, but they don't bother to establish him much. Anyway, we'll get to that more
Well,
because there's more Hopper in the
realistically,
next
in
scene.
the books, this is one of my annoying things about this Hopper is you were like, well, what was his motive for leaving the pack and da 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 da. Hopper dies before leaving the pack.
Exactly.
In the books, he dies defending Perrin when the pack is defending Perrin. And then Perrin gets to know him through the wolf dream because now he's in the dream. And it's Hopper never leaves the pack. He was a wolf that died protecting him
Hmm.
as a pack member.
Hmm.
And in the afterlife, basically in the wolf afterlife,
And, and
decides to help the cub in any way he can because he sees he needs protection. He needed to protect him in real life, and now he needs to protect him in the dream.
and that was
So
the shocking instigating event for Perrin to accept the pack because this wolf was willing to die for me. This pack member
Mhm.
was willing to die for me, and he has a very emotional reaction to that. Was oh yes. So anyway, so she does you do that to shock the audience and to show she's gonna do anything. But then at the end of the episode, she just says, "Okay, well, go to sleep and confront Lanfear." After you've spent
In her territory.
in her territory, after you've spent several episodes establishing one, how dangerous she is in general because she's so powerful, and two, how dangerous she is to Rand in particular because they were lovers in his former life.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll do anything to keep the Dragon Reborn from the shadow and keep him and make sure he accomplishes mission. But okay, well, I guess I'm out of ideas now, so just go to sleep and confront Lanfear.
Which is a plot hole they put themselves in by having her quote unquote stilled,
Yes.
because in the books she helped protect his dreams.
Oh.
All right, so that's episode 5. We took over an hour to get through episode 5. I don't have any notes for episode 6 because I watched it while in Germany, and then I watched it with you while we were just sitting there. So it's really, there is good in episode 6,
Yeah, so
but
let's
in a general good.
I have thoughts here, so let's talk about the good first, and then we'll need a pause for a bit so I can go pick up the child.
Okay.
Uh, most of episode 6 is Egwene's captivity and torture.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the good.
And that's the good. And I told you this when we were rewatching it, is that this is an example of fixating on a small thing where it works, because the picture was just kind of a throwaway line in the book that was used as an example to show the audience how the Adam worked and what Egwene was going through. So what they did is they used it as a device that all of Egwene's torture and training scenes revolved around. And it works because it lets the audience have a focus point, and it lets you accelerate and fast forward what was weeks, if not, no, it was months, wasn't it? Because they lost something like 3 months in using the portal stone, I believe it was,
Mm-hmm.
when they traveled. So she was a captive for about 3 months or more, but you don't have time to do that in a show, and it's going to be more difficult, especially with all the stupid choices you've already made, setting that aside. So you've got to fast forward it, and this works as a device for that. This works to compact all of what you know about her abuse into a much shorter time frame. And it's actually done very well. It's acted well and it's written well between these two. And I think it always helps when you really want to convey some emotion, that you just have two actors looking at each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the uh, best and perhaps most notable example is Silence of the Lambs, with two incredible actors, very well written, and they're just staring at each other across the table, or through a pane of glass, and it's mostly just talking, but it's incredibly impactful. Um, and you have a lot of that here. You have Brenna just talking, and you start to get that creepy feeling of, and I thought they could have done more and could have done better. This is another example of where they don't do enough explaining to the audience. But again, I wonder if this actress actually knows the source material, because I got the feeling that, oh, at first you feel like she's treating her like a child, like she's a school marm and she's treating her like a child. But as it progresses, I think you start to see and you start to realize, oh, no, 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 this isn't a school marm training an unruly child. This is a master training a new dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they really show that. And I thought one of the better scenes was when Rena loses her temper and starts physically attacking Egwene, and there's a look of regret in her eyes. It's very much uh this is gonna hurt you more than it's gonna hurt me, son, when your dad's about to spank you, and you actually believe it. Uh and it helps what's gonna happen in episode 7 and then presumably in episode 8 of setting up who these people are and what this is that's going on here. The only critique I had of this, and it's I try, like I said, I try and keep it inside the show, but one of the reasons it was more in fact impactful in the book, besides the fact that you just had more time to explore this, is that she wasn't in a dungeon. She was in a nice, clean, basically a dormitory.
Mm-hmm.
So you had all of this terribleness happening to her, and there was a shocking juxtaposition with the setting, because you expect someone in a dungeon to be tortured, but she wasn't in a dungeon. She was in basically a big dormitory, which, if were it not for the freaking leashes, you would think, oh, this is like a girls' school.
Mm-hmm. Well, except that she was technically tortured because she couldn't drink until she solved the whole
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and that was to me the biggest weakness of this scene, is it was very much like you said about the, wait a minute, you established earlier that you'd been traveling for days. How long has Rand gone without sleep, and how much longer do you expect him to go without sleep? That's dangerous. Well, same thing here. They don't they skirt it by not giving you any indication of how much time has passed, but you do get the indication time is passing,
Mm-hmm.
and she's not able to drink. That's a big problem.
Yeah, they the first time they interact, she says, I'm going to give you time to think. I will see you tomorrow."
Uh-huh.
And so there's at least one day passed, but then we don't know if there's multiple trips after that in a day, or if it's one day at a time, or if it's one day at a time, that's many days without a drink.
And you could have had a very brief scene there that would have made it even, that would have really driven the point home of Egwene is deteriorating because she can't drink, and Rena basically holds her down and force feeds her. Because I can't have you uh injuring yourself. I can't have the the Empress's new star domine hurting herself because you're too stubborn to drink, you know, and I think that is something that is mentioned in the books, though, that if you won't eat, they'll just force feed you. So there, that's one of the, there is no escape. You can't even hurt yourself, because they won't let it, because you're too valuable as a thing. But then there's a lot of crap in here too. So we'll pause here for a minute, and you'll see a little hiccup, and then we'll be back to do a little bit of ranting before we get to episode 7. Oh joy. Do you have a
Oh
lot of
joy.
notes on 7?
Not as much as on one, but yeah, there's a decent amount there.
There's one big glaring thing to me, and it's when Rand goes to the Amarillo, and I think it encompasses so much of what is wrong with this series.
Yeah, I've got. Oh, I must have been pressing hard on the paper when I wrote that. So, yeah, there's that, and then there's the Matt stupidness in this next that coming episode. But
Mhm. All right, well, we'll have fun with that. Match should be fun, but it's going to be the wrong kind of fun.
yeah, all right. Well, you'll see a hiccup, but it'll be like 30 minutes for us. So.
All right, little hiccup there. We're back. You'll notice the angle of my camera has changed because I've got the Rangers and Rays going on, because I have to, because they were on a bad slump. And then my wife asked me, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" And I said, "I want to go somewhere where I can have the Rangers game on one TV and the Monday Night Football game on another TV, and watch both games at the same time." And ever since then, they went on a good run that got them back into the playoffs. And that's just science. So I have to watch, because it's
Oh,
science.
I'm gonna refrain from my rant about superstitions and how it's just a way for everybody to make themselves feel special. But
Uh, I don't know why. It's a baseball thing too. It's I wasn't
baseball players and kickers are exceptionally superstitious. Yes.
I wasn't superstitious with any other sport I did. But baseball, there's something about baseball, and I have to think it's the repetition, because you do it more. you play more games, you have more practices, other things you don't do to the same degree because you can't if it's a more combative, more violent sport.
Well, I
Uh,
would say it's partly because of the neurological component to it that you're
mm,
more likely to end up in a slump and a run because of the dopamine reinforcement that goes along with the
good point.
positive feedback loops. And positive feedback loops can lead to a negative result. It means
The,
it means one thing just leads to the other in the same direction, right? So
another hypothesis is that there's more time to think because of the pace of the game. You're inside your own head a lot more than in other games
well,
because
yeah,
the
well, that's what I'm saying. What's in your head is more of a determining factor than, like, say, covering a receiver,
Mhm,
where you're basically you've just practiced yourself into instinct at that point.
yeah.
And so I think it was the same with shooting free throws in basketball. You know, you see somebody go on a slump, it's usually in this is where, okay, so one person that's been making the rounds in the woke space is Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Uh-huh.
And if I was someone who had any kind of name recognition in the scientific field that I'm in physiology, I would make this, I'll still make the challenge. If somebody of the 50 people that watch this is in the know with Neil deGrasse Tyson, I challenge him to this.
Mhm.
We will have an astrophysics debate followed by a physiology debate, or the other way around. Either way, I'll give him the win first because I guarantee you he's going to wipe his ass with me in the
Mhm.
astrophysics debate. But just hearing him talk on anything physiology, he has zero clue. When he was on Rogan, he was talking about, and what made me think of this is the fallacy. He calls it the fallacy of the hot hand in basketball. Give it to him, he's got the hot hand. He said it's all probabilities because if you do the statistics, it all comes out to da, da, da. No, it's like, no, those statistics are post hoc. They include the good games and the bad games. But during the game, there is a neurological process happening with dopamine triggers, with all kinds of neurotransmitters, that he actually does have a hot hand. And his body is reinforced to have the stroke, the same stroke that leads to the positive outcome. And that can go away with a few days rest, and actually neurologically can go away with a few misses in a row, because then you start overcompensating and you get in this basically feeling out motor pattern to try to find that stroke again. And so there is a such thing as the hot hand, and he has no clue because he doesn't understand the underlying processes
Mhm.
behind skeletal muscle development, even on the micro level or even in the short term. And then he starts talking about the transgender thing, and he goes all woke. And Konstantin Kisin, I don't agree with the headline that he destroys Neil deGrasse Tyson, but at the same time he exposes how little he knows to some
Mhm.
degree. And so I would happily have an astrophysics debate, which I know he's going to murder me on, followed by a physiology debate on any topics physiological, and I will murder him. I
Hey,
guarantee you.
hey, you want to make it more fun instead of debating you on the first debate, he can debate me on cosmology and I'll give him I'll take the creationist side and let him kick my butt. Yeah, go for it.
Well, but
We'll
I
we'll
think
we'll
I think
set it up.
it's fitting to show the contrast between
Yeah,
the same person debating you,
that's true. Yeah, that's
because
that's the whole point there.
this, I hate when people say stay in your lane, except for the fact that sometimes you do need to stay in your lane. When
Oh,
you clearly have a deficit in your knowledge, you need to stay in your lane. And like I said, I am not going to debate Neil deGrasse Tyson, except in this situation where to prove a point on string theory, or on what the new whatever Hubble, no, Hubble's the old one. What's the new
Webb
one?
is the new one.
The
Webb.
Webb Space Telescope
Yeah.
is going to teach us with infrared and ultraviolets and all of that. He will beat me on that. He can do, calculations that I can't do based on that. He can do relativity calculations and stuff that I can't do. Fine. Now let's talk physiology. And guess what? You know absolutely jack shit based on what I've heard you talk about.
The stay in your lane where it's applicable and where it matters is when someone is speaking authoritatively in a field where they don't have authority. That's when athletes start pontificating on politics and sociology and all of these things that they know jack squat about. That's the stay in your lane, because you're not just offering an opinion, you're speaking authoritatively.
Well, and that's
You
why I
don't
went
have
back
the
to
authority
school
for it.
because I am going through a structured program on something I had a lot of thoughts about. And frankly, I don't want to get it wrong because
Mhm.
I don't even want a few moments of somebody saying, "Well, guess what? Here's all the things you got wrong, stay in your lane." Now I can from at least a baseline standpoint at this point say, "Well, no, but in developmental psych da 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 during this part of and I can actually talk to them in their language because I've been there. It's
Speaking of
not just
staying,
me reading books that I agree with. I am under somebody else's
yeah,
program, so it takes my bias out of it.
that's a good point. So speaking of staying in your lane and developmental psychology, Rand. So the opening to the episodes that we talked about, Egwene, and why we like that. Here's where things don't work as well. And one of them is this. Oh, the first scene after Egwene here is Rand and Lanfear, which is where we left off the last episode.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have the impact because you've already made Rand grow up too fast. You've already put him in a modern context. Why is he being such a simp for Celine, even after knowing this isn't her name's not Celine, this is Lanfear? He doesn't have that puppy love anymore. There was a connection. There was that, and you've talked about the younger man, the older woman. Even in the book where she was making herself look younger, Rand still got the feeling that she was a few years older than he was.
Well, we
So,
will use the word experienced, more experienced than him.
mhm. So she was more experienced, along with knowing how to manipulate him, and he's a horny teenage virgin. Well, except he's not anymore because you had him banging Egwene in the first episode. So why is he being such a simp now? It doesn't make sense that he would be such a simp for Lanfear. The reason the reason in the book is because there's this fantasy component that he's built up in his own mind of this woman, Celine, who's a minor noble who thinks I'm something more, something different than what I am. And you see that from his point of view, you see the appeal there of, of stroking his ego and him wanting her to stroke something else.
Mhm. Well, but it flips on its head when she gives him the offer and he does the thing he should have known better than to do and asks to see Egwene. I mean, we've already established that she
Mhm.
was his lover and he knows that.
We've
And
also established that the
and
whole
in real Randland, she was his lover and we established that. Oh, let me do this thing that's going to make one of the most powerful people in history that got stabbed right in front of me and her throat slit and is still here. Let's go ahead and piss her off with this one request.
yeah, and reveal a vulnerability that now we saw in the Lanfear Shamil scene that Lanfear for some reason knows all about the girls. I guess because she knows all about the girls, but Rand doesn't know that. I mean, she makes I think she makes a reference to them at some point, but he doesn't know that she already knows who she is to Rand by asking for this favor and then being so emotional in front of her. You've just put a giant target on Egwene. And in the context, again, criticizing it in its own context, in the context of the show, he faked his death and ran away from his friends to protect them. So why is he doing this?
Yeah, revealing to the person who's trying to kill everybody around him who he cares about. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's extra annoying because otherwise it's a pretty darn good scene, really based all on Natasha O'Keefe. Now her outfit is bizarre looking, but I've
Well,
ranted about the style choices here already.
we
Uh,
ranted to each other. I made the comparison. They're trying to make her Trinity from the Matrix,
yes, but
and
just in general, I've ranted about the style that because they've gone too far already with the diversity now to make these, you know, alien, otherworldly people even more different, they have to crank it up to 11, and it just looks weird and bizarre. And they're doing the same thing with the Forsaken and the Age of Legends stuff. Is, well, we've already got a very modern aesthetic in Randland and a lot of places. So now to make these people look bizarre, we have to make them look like jarringly bizarre, creepily sci-fi bizarre. And so it's it takes you out of the scene a little bit, but otherwise it's a pretty good scene, except for the fact that you have all these glaring problems that you made for yourself that you didn't have to make.
Yeah. What
Uh
else was memorable about episode 6?
um well, we start to get into the Matt stuff because you see Matt and Min are for some reason in the foregate. And it's because Min took him there, and she thinks I could see why, because it's a
Oh yeah,
lively
yeah,
place.
yeah.
It's it's the French Quarter during Mardi Gras every day is kind of how I see the foregate, is kind of how Jordan describes it. And so you get a little bit of that. But it's mostly setting up the awfulness to come.
Yeah.
Um,
When Rand, in running away, runs back into Matt.
and then you get a short scene with the yellow sister who's rescued Nynaeve and Elaine, and we've ranted about this before of why that, but it's especially egregious here. In the tower, it's bad enough that you don't show deference to your superiors
Mm-hmm.
in the Aes Sedai, but it's so much worse here because this person is literally saving your life, and you're being an argumentative, petulant child.
Mm-hmm.
Why? This is absolutely stupid. The only good thing about this scene is they give Elaine a nice moment here where they show you that she's the political one, she's the diplomatic one, she's going to be the one to smooth things over, which is the role she plays in The Dragon Reborn between Nynaeve and Egwene. And we haven't had that because we've had almost none of the three of them together, which was really annoying. Um, but here you at least get that part of her character. That part of her character is able to shine. Um, but then we get the scene I referenced earlier, contrasting Suroth and Ishamiel, and now Leandrin and Lanfear. This is actually an impactful scene
Mm-hmm.
because you've established who Lanfear or Leandrin is. The actress has really pulled you into this character. She's made you believe this is a real person with real depth. And the way she plays this, it, it is so infuriating that Suroth is so dumb with Shamil. And I love the way Leandrin plays this when Lanfear is killing her son right in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
and
yeah, you get so many things from the scene, and I'll actually have to take back something I said from a previous scene, which was when you're introduced to the whole son dynamic. And I kind of made a snarky comment during one of these filmings that, oh, trying to make Leandrin more human, yeah, we don't need that. That's wasted time. This scene made it worth it
yes,
because
this,
now you've got Leandrin's motivation for being a dark friend. Now you've got a good scene in general, and you've got contrast from Lanfear and Ishi, because Ishi was playing this dynamic to get Leandrin to do his bidding, where Lanfear comes in and says, "This is what's holding you back.
mhm.
This is your downfall. Let me just take that away from you. It's gonna hurt, but guess what? Life sucks."
She is, you know, I just had a thought. I wonder if they weren't necessarily trying to make her look like Trinity. It just comes off that way because I think maybe what they were trying to do is make her a dominatrix.
Well, yeah, there is that element, but I think that Trinity was supposed to look like a dominatrix. So, but
Yeah.
it's just the fact that they shortened her hair a little bit, they made it exact that slip
And
back,
she
and
she has a very similar facial structure to Carrie Ann
mm-hmm,
Moss as well. So that just adds to it. But the dominatrix thing works here
Well,
It plays
you
here.
see that later in episode 7 even more. I think I wrote a note that says I do like high-laced leather boots.
But but that's what she's doing here. She is being, but there's no sexual component. There's no seduction. She is being harsh, but it's for your own good
Mm-hmm.
because and that's who she ultimately is she can seduce like she does with Rand, but you see why she's a villain. And it to your point, they do a nice contrast with Ishamael is the nihilistic philosopher. He's the corrupter. That's not who Lanfear is. And so it's nice that they actually give them distinct personalities and they actually show that. And to your point, oh my gosh, it's almost like if you take the time to set something up, then the payoff is that much better.
Yeah, we'll get to that here in a little bit with Ishii with his dealings with Matt, because some horrible scenes have some actual good elements to them. Because you get that again, we just got Lanfear contrasting Ishii. Now we're going to get Ishii from his philosophical side coming up here in a little bit, and it's evil. It's different kinds of evil. It's the banality of evil and the benevolence of evil, and just actual the harshness of evil.
But one of
And
the
we've
reasons
talked
that
about this in the books, the difference between the Dark One
mm,
and Shadow
Shadow
Logoth.
Logoth, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's
But so something I hadn't thought of before, and it just dawned on me because of what you said, is there's actually a double payoff in this scene with Leandrin, because not only have you paid off the scene with her son, but you're also paying off the conversation she has with Nynaeve in the ways, because you can see that she's somewhat regretful, but she doesn't have a choice because she has sold her soul to the Dark One. She has to, and it turns out it was all for nothing. So this person that she wanted to be a protege, Nynaeve, she has sold her into slavery and abuse for the promise of
power.
of well of the the ability to fix her son, to
Mm-hmm.
have her son live, and now it was just taken away from her, so it was all for nothing. So you get a double payoff here, and that's one of the reasons Leander, the actress, forgetting Fleetwood, Kate Fleetwood, she plays it so well, and it's such a stark contrast with Suroth, is she turns away and you can see she hates this. She's torn up. But she, I mean, this is one of the frickin' Forsaken. She can't do anything. She can't do anything. Not only can't she do anything, she can't even say anything. She can't contradict what Lanfear is doing. She has to she has to say yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
And, and yet you
May
can
I
tell
have
she's torn
another?
up about.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's torn up because you're killing her son, and you have made all that she has done for nothing. The whole reason she sold her soul to the Dark One was for this, and now it's gone, but that deal's still there. Those ties are still there. She's
Well,
still
now it makes you wonder how they're
locked
going to
in
go
with the Dark
forward
One.
with Leandrin, because we've speculated that she might be Elida and Leandrin in one
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
Does she start doing Elida things in a vengeful, I hate the dark now kind of way?
That's an interesting
Or
thought.
does she double down and say, well, I did all these evil things, now I'm a puppet of the dark?
Now I'm stuck. I don't have a
Yeah.
choice. Um, and then we get to the scene that we thought was horrific, and it's still dumb to me, but it's not as bad because they did actually sort of set it up. But it was a very weak setup to have Loyal and Ingtar there, and all of a sudden, Loyal cares so much about Egwene that, and it's not just that it's, well, he's a good person and they're abusing. Okay, but they know who the Domine are. They have seen them capture. They have seen them leash women on this side of the planet. And there's no, well, we have to save these people. No, it's specifically Egwene. I'm not going anywhere. I will jeopardize my freedom if it means saving Egwene. Why? You did not set that up. I mean, it's a stark contrast with the scene we were just talking about, which did have great setup. And now you're just shoving this in here because you need this contrivance, and because you also want um I've used wrestling references before, and one of them is called there's a term in wrestling called cheap heat, which is where if you're the heel, if you're the bad guy, you want to get the crowd booing you, right? Well, there are deep ways to do that, and there are cheap, shallow ways to do that. And an example Steve Austin uses is spitting on someone. If you spit on someone, that's cheap heat because it's easy, it's simple, anyone can do it, and there's no depth there. Now, if you go on a story arc where you're constantly screwing this guy over, or you're pretending to be his friend and then screwing him over, that's establishing something with depth. That's good heat, because now the audience hates you for for reasons that are explainable and tangible. It's not the gut reaction of, oh, hey, you spit on the good guy, I hate you. This is cheap heat. This is we need to quickly and easily establish that one, Loyal's a good guy, and two, that he cares about Egwene, and three, that this is why they're going to be around in the end, at the end of the finale, trying to rescue her. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's cheap.
Is the next scene where we get to Rand and Matt reuniting?
Uh, well, we've got some more Egwene, but we've talked about that, and then you get Ishamael and Min, which
Yeah, that doesn't establish. I mean, it. I don't know where that storyline's going because
well, yeah, I don't know where it's going, but I don't like it. Then you get this bizarre Temple of the Forsaken thing with Varen, or
oh
not
yeah,
Varen,
yeah.
with Alana and Lan, and this is leading up to my rant in episode 7 that this whole season they have completely neutered Lan. His balls are in a jar now, and first, Moraine had the jar with his balls, and now Alana has the jar with his balls, and he has no agency, which is a word the woke left loves to use and throw around, but they don't know what it actually means, and they don't actually use it.
Well,
You
and the
know, the
sad thing to me, and this is actually one of my first notes about episode 7, so we might be pretty close to segueing
Mhm.
here, is a lot of this is made worse by Lan's not having his landness. Like he's just not the person we know. But it was made necessary by the freaking annoying Moraine storyline. You had to have him be this way in order to make her thing make sense.
but again, we're back to the cheap. Is they don't want to or don't know how to establish this with death. You could have, even in this dumb scene, you still could have had him having his, as you say, his landness, that he just spills the beans about the dragon is reborn because he's being threatened. So he's a wuss and a coward, but also a moron, because he has no way of being sure that these aren't dark friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could have simply said something along the lines of, some secrets aren't mine to give. And it still could have ended up where it goes, which is them going to the Amarillan. Um, all right, well, then we will take you to the Amarillan if she's someone who can tell us what the hell is going on here. But, but we're watching you, in one false move and you're dead, kind of thing.
See,
But
this was
they don't.
established way back when Moiraine left, because Lan from the books, if Moiraine was quote unquote stilled, I mean, he's like 6'5" and 250 pounds of beef and raw muscle and experience. He would have looked at her and said, no,
Mhm.
you can't channel. Guess what? Put her over his shoulder till she grew up.
They
And that's what he would have done, because we saw that in New Spring.
And they told us that. I had thought about that, but again, within the context of the show, they've already undermined this because they don't show you, but they tell you the story of him throwing her in the lake because she tried to take his sword. Where is that guy? What happened to him? And now he's a complete wuss. but not just a wuss, but also again, to me, this is almost worse than the being the wuss. Is he's a coward. He's being threatened, and he's potentially endangering the entire world by revealing what he knows about the Dragon Reborn. Because again, he has no way of knowing these aren't dark friends.
Yeah. The land from the books would have died with the secret.
Or, or found a way to, be smart enough to kind of feel out why do you want to know this? Is this you want to know this because you want to help because you're good guys, or because you want to deal with the Dragon Reborn as the dark?
I think they slightly took that out of the story when they put in the whole little story about them not trusting him because they think he's a dark friend from
Mhm.
snooping around in his saddlebags
Mhm.
and happening to find the one piece of paper in there that was damning in some way.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's more cheap saying stuff that doesn't is never been established and never really been explained, which was the dark prophecy. Okay, well, how do you know that's a dark prophecy, and how do you know what that means? I mean, we haven't seen a lot of the dragon prophecy in the show at all, but I mean, it just kind of reads like prophecy. How do you know it's of the dark just because it's talking about Lanfear? Well, how
Mm-hmm.
do you even know it's talking about Lanfear? Because again, this is esoteric knowledge.
I think they said the words "daughter of the night,"
Yeah. Okay, okay,
which
that's
is a nickname for her. Yeah.
then we get the scene with Rand begging and crying for Lanfear to take him to Egwene so that, he can put a target on her back. Um there's a lot of awfulness here, but it's yeah, and then some more terribleness, and then Rand and Matt finally meet up. Um and it at least that is genuine. These are two friends who used to be best friends. They grew up together, life separated them, and now they're reunited, and it's actually played well.
I don't. I hate that you use the words "life separated them" though, because the one thing that didn't happen in this scene is Rand going, "Why the fuck
What?
did you leave us?"
Yes, yes.
Because it wasn't that they left him behind or he fell behind or anything. He turned around and walked away, and everybody said, "I can't believe he left."
That's a
And
very
then
good
next
point.
time they
Yeah.
meet, he doesn't even mention the words, "Why did you leave?"
What the heck happened there, man?
Yeah.
What? Well, yeah, I have to tell you what happened. I have to tell you all these things because you weren't there. Why weren't you there? There
Mm-hmm.
was there was never a moment of that. Um which again, you need these things to create depth, because if you don't have conflict, if you have the fairy tale romance, okay, well, that's nice for a children's story, but for anyone from a teenager upward, you need more depth than that. You need there to be challenges to this romance. Well, same thing with friendship. You need challenges there to show they overcame this, and now, and you had that in the book with Matt uh with Matt and Perrin finding out that Rand can channel, that Moraine wants him to be the Dragon Reborn, and all of this, and okay, that's a big effing deal, and that's kind of scary, but you're still Rand.
Yeah.
We're
And
gonna figure this out.
well, and you even have the dynamic in that where Matt was kind of a jerk because he doesn't handle it well. Where Matt didn't handle this well, but he just left. And now it's like, oh, we hit the factory reset by having a new actor. So now we could just start over.
Yeah.
And then Min spills the beans about her stupid vision, which we're probably going to get some lame something out of that where Matt doesn't actually kill Rand. He kills a doppelganger or
Who the hell knows?
something, or
Well,
or he stabs Rand in a way that doesn't kill him, but to save him from something else, like a fake death kind of thing.
I would not be surprised if they just, I mean, completely ruin the source material and just come up with some BS way of, well, her vision was wrong. It,
Yeah, it's weird because the trailer to I'm wondering if they're trying to combine something here because in the vision he stabs him with the ruby dagger.
hmm.
Uh And we know in Falm from the books, spoiler alert if you haven't read the books, and probably something we're going to see here in the next episode, is the wound he gets in Falm counters with the dagger wound he gets way later. And I'm wondering if we're going to get both of those things together.
Hmm. So yeah, so do the double wound now instead of when it happens.
Yeah. And in the trailer, I know they do things with the film to throw you off, but it almost implies that Lan fights Ferris instead of Rand
Mhm.
because of some wound Rand is holding. If you watch the trailer, he's holding his side and Lan jumps in front of him. So who knows what's going on there, since Lan wasn't even supposed to be in Falm, uh but yeah, if the dagger's part of it, Matt's part of it, it might be something to do with that whole storyline they're trying to condense into one little event.
So last thing on this episode, what did you think about the fight at the end between the Sanshin and the Yellow and her warder? Because I thought it was almost good, but they kind of ruined it
Well,
by
here's how they ruined it to me. He took out Soldem, but then the same Domine would be fighting still during the battle. So it was like there was no connection going the
but
other way.
but they do show the connection when the Yellow kills the Soldam.
Mm-hmm.
And the Domine also and falls
Yeah, but
down.
then that same Domine is fighting again later in the fight. Either they just got the sequencing of the editing wrong or they just didn't
Yeah.
care.
A lot of these things are made in the editing room, and that makes for a lot of mistakes. So that it may have been editing stupidity. I thought they kind of ruined it by taking away from the seriousness of the situation with some of those weird kind of dance-like intimate moments between the two of them
Mm-hmm.
that they could have done with just a look, just a look and a nod.
Well, in one of those, I think she healed him.
Oh, did she?
He had taken
I
a
didn't see
wound,
that.
and then they did a thing where it looked like they were doing kind of a tango for a second, and all of a sudden he was rejuvenated,
Hmm.
and then he started
Okay.
going, and she's a
That makes sense.
yellow. So I think it was very subtle, too subtle for a quick movie scene, but I think she was supposed to have healed him, and I didn't catch it till the second time I watched it.
That could be it. That's another one of those the inconsistent cheapness of the show that we kind of opened talking about, hey man, this scene looks great, why don't they all look like this, and what this scene looks great, and then we go to one that looks kind of crappy. Well, same thing here is you show the weave sometimes and you don't at other times.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a pretty simple thing to show weaves going from her into him and then his wounds closing, but that would have cost VFX money.
Yeah, and the continuity there could have been like, even like in the books you get somebody's perspective, but even in a show or a movie scene, you still it's not always third party perspective. So whoever the main visual person in that scene is, and I would actually argue that that would be Nynaeve and Elaine in that scene, because they're the onlookers to what's going on,
uh
should be what determines whether you see the weaves or not.
it's a good point.
And they would have been able to see the weaves. So we should have been able to get that perspective. Whereas if you had scenes of like Matt peeking around the corner watching this fight, well, I would understand if you didn't show the weaves at that point. So you can kind of imply who the main eyes are to what you're watching versus just having it as a complete third party thing all the time. But you're right, it within the same scene they showed some weaves and they didn't show others.
All right, so now on to episode 7. Thank goodness we're almost done here. So you,
Yeah.
you said you had notes here.
Yeah,
So
Swan and Away and Moiraine still annoying. Their little love tryst thing that they got going on. What are we gonna do after the tower? Like sisters don't stay in the tower until they're pretty much old and wrinkled, anyways. But it was teen angst kind of loves this Twilight shit going on there.
and it doesn't work because you haven't. All right, so I think I've used this example before, is that um I watched that animated Witcher movie about what's his face, the guy who trains Geralt, after seeing season two, and I think it worked really well, worked better that way, knowing who he was, and then seeing what an arrogant dick he used to be. And then by the end of the movie, you see how why he became so hard and why he became so uh uh myopically dedicated to the Witchers as an institution because of what he went through. You don't bother They don't bother to do that here. That you're using the scenes, you're trying to use the emotions of New Spring, but you never bother to establish, first of all, who Sawan. You don't even really know who Moraine and Sawan are now because you're so damned inconsistent with how you show them and how you portray them. But then you haven't actually shown us the events from New Spring. You've just referenced them a couple of times. So you don't know how. I mean, I talked about this when we did our review of New Spring, when we went through that reread, is that I like where it comes in the series, and I like, even if you haven't read these before, I would say don't read them in chronological order because New Spring works so much better once you already know who Moraine is.
Mm-hmm.
And you see who Moraine and Sawan are as accepted, just about to be raised to Aes Sedai, and you can see the traits that are there now in who they are, as mature adults, and the things that they've done and are doing. So you can see those traits there, but they're raw, they're not fully formed, and they haven't had the harsh life experience that is going to turn them into the very, very rigid and driven women that they become. You don't establish any of that. And on top of that, this scene is just crap. The foretelling, or the prophecy that he lives has no emotion. That scene just didn't do anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
That there was, I mean, it was done better in a freaking comic book. In the graphic novel of New Spring, that scene is more impactful.
And then once we get through the flashback, we get to the scene we were talking about earlier, where Lan is starting to be the mentor to Rand all of a sudden. But they did it in such a stupid way where he reaches to grab Rand's sword, and Rand basically doesn't do anything really interesting except like shrug away from him. And he goes, "Oh, Harren wading in the brushes. Someone's been teaching you." And it's like, oh, you could at least had him do something cool to be called Harren in the brushes. But then so it would have been nice if Lan had actually taught him these things in
Yep.
it. But then he gives him the advice to do the cat walking through the courtyard. And this is where I come in because I do gait analysis sometimes for a living. And what is described as cat walking in the courtyard is not what Rand does when he walks in the room. He does what I would call white boy casual pimp walk as he goes in. Because Land describes it where it's like
Yeah,
the string pulling you up and everything is relaxed. Well, they tried to make him look relaxed, and he walks in like,
which I
and
think
I'm
is
like, that's a
something,
bad gait pattern, by the way. You're gonna have back pain when you get older.
you
But
know,
that is
one of
the
the
opposite of what is
one
described.
one of the books you should have up there, I think, is the Tower of Jeet Kune Do, because isn't that kind of how Bruce Lee describes the JKD fighting stance? Is something similar to that,
Mm-hmm.
and it is something that is tricky to do, especially for beginners. Is the idea of being relaxed but ready.
Well, it's one of the hardest things to teach an athlete is to be able to produce force but be relaxed at the same time. But watch the great athletes move. You
Hmm.
know, watch Ronaldo, watch even LeBron James or Michael Jordan. They're not stiff when they move. They move in a very, very, very smooth, fluid way. And that is the thing that separates the greats from the goods. Because if you got great raw power and all of these things, you can get to a high level. But
Yeah.
if you can't relax while you do it, you're going to hit your ceiling at some point. Here's a great example: Anderson Silva. Watch
Mm.
him fight versus Brock Lesnar. You know, You can see how tense Brock is, and you notice he never knocks anybody out, even though he's so big and powerful.
It's a good point.
Where Silva looks like he just flicks his wrist and you're gone. But he knows how to relax till the point of impact, which is it creates the wrecking ball effect versus the
Because
club.
you're not wasting energy with tense
Mm-hmm.
muscles is the idea there. But to the story, it not only does it not work because, to your point, what he says is not translated onto the screen, but even before you get there, again, we went on for quite some time talking about that Leander and Lanfear scene because it was good, because it was set up. You have zero setup here. And then what, because again, it's cheap heat. You're trying to borrow to not borrow. You're just stealing these moments from the book, but you haven't done any of the establishment that make them work in the book. The reason that fans love this scene, the reason that we love the line that Land delivers of there's one rule above all else. And this whole sequence here, to me, this encompasses the awfulness of this series in one short scene here. You have not done anything to establish Lan as a mentor, but you want the impact of him saying this supposedly profound thing, which again, as we've ranted about, you don't even get, because if there are any men in the writing room, they aren't masculine men. So they don't get one rule above all else for being a man. Whatever comes, you face it on your feet. That does not have the impact you think it does because you never bothered to set it up. One, and then two, what's about to happen to Rand? He goes in that room, the Amarillan bitch slaps him, and he falls on his knees and stays there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the point where he meets her in the books, that would have worked from her perspective. Mm-hmm. But at the point we're at in the story where he's supposed to be in the world already, he's already gotten the idea that he can kind of feel something when a woman's about to channel. And this has happened to him a few times already. He should be learning by now, but he's a mouth breathing, stupid motherfucker. So we're
Especially
not
when you
getting that.
need him to be.
Yeah.
So he was able to stand up to and confront Lanfear to a degree, but now because you want the Amarillan, you want Siwan and Moraine to be the ultimate girl bosses, no fight back whatsoever. He's an absolute dead fish to her.
Even from a raw power standpoint, at this point in the books, he would have been able to slam against the shield and break through. He was that much more powerful than Siwan, even when Siwan was at full force.
And because you were trying to do this,
this is even incongruent with the show, because we got that with
Logain,
because they needed 3 to hold him. And Logain already commented how much more powerful Rand was than he was. So just from a raw, childish, I'm going to run my face into a wall standpoint, he should have been able to break out of that shield.
That's an even better example than I was going to use, because the example I was leading to was Nynaeve, when they see how powerful she is and they think, oh, could she be the dragon? Because they know that the dragon is supposed to be, way above everyone else in power level, and they are in awe of Nynaeve's power, that no one has come to the tower with this kind of power for as long as anyone can remember, or perhaps ever. And so you've already established that since Rand is the dragon, he should have that degree of power relative to everybody else, right? So where is it? Where's this power that he should have?
All right. Let's shelf that scene like Rand is shelved. So nonchalantly. And then we get to Matt again, who we need Matt and Falm. So beam me up, Scotty. It's pretty much what it's, but I said, but I had another note, but hey, there's donuts. The next scene after, where they're going through the street, the one person is making donuts in the hey, but at least they have donuts in Falm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's basically what happens. Matt, knocked out, shows up in Falm with Lanfear there, who probably traveled to get him there, but we haven't established that traveling's a thing because she chased Rand and Moiraine on a horse. But,
Well, also, I think what they're trying to do here is again cheap heat. They're trying to steal um the emotion and the characterization that you get with this scene in The Dragon Reborn, right? That they tried to do a little bit of that at the beginning of this season with Matt in Tar Valon and the interactions he has with Leandrin, which are somewhat reminiscent of the interactions he has with Swan after he's healed. All right, but he is able to banter and he kind of accepts where he's at in that moment because he has a reason for being there, which is that he was brought to the tower for healing. He was just kidnapped by some strange woman and transported all the way across the known world. As far as he knows, his world is this continent, and he was on this side next to the spine of the world, and now he's on this side next to the Aerith Ocean, and in the snap of a finger, as far as he knows. So his defenses should be way up, and yet he's way too accepting of what the hell is going on here. Through not just this scene, which is really short, but then when Ishamil comes in a little later,
well,
he is way too accepting of what's going on here.
Another layer to it. Min had already just told him that you kill Rand and Falme.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's just told he's in Falm. And it's like, okay, so not only did I just get beamed halfway across the continent, I got beamed to the place I was told I'm going to kill somebody who's my friend. Who I didn't go talk to because I didn't want to talk to him, so I didn't end up in this place with him.
Yes,
now I'm in
exactly.
this place. Oh, lovely writers. Then we go to the girls again, Elaine and Nynaeve. And this is where I put the note that this is where I thought Elaine really started taking control. And it actually worked.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's, shut up, Nynaeve. We need to do this my way now. We did it your way and you were stupid and we got caught.
All right. So then you get Rand getting
Okay, this is the self-own scene again that will get us canceled. So to preface this scene, I looked something up while you were gone because I knew it existed. We got some work by Robin Dunbar. We talked about the Dunbar number, your 515, 150. Well, he's done a lot of work on females and what he calls the hired gun or bodyguard hypothesis on actually manipulating males through sex and other attachment schemes to basically be the protection against other males and infanticide and basically the evils of the world. And Swan says that's exactly what we're going to do with you. We are going to take you. We are going to hold you. We are going to only let you do the things we want you to do, but then we're going to use you as a weapon against evil. She just says it out loud instead of with flirty faces and boob flashes and
so you just reminded me of one of my rants about this episode that when we were talking, and this is a great example of that. The episode is titled Das Diamar, the game of houses. There is no game here. Everyone is just saying flat out what is going on. There is no subtlety in this episode whatsoever.
This is a theme, and this is the cancellation part. Women want and need men to protect them from the evils of the world and nature and other men. But when that isn't a threat, they don't want or need men, which is why we're having such a huge problem in the dating and marriage scene right now, because nature is outsourced to grocery stores and protection from other men is outsourced to the police force. So what use is a good man to you? You might as well get a man that does what you say.
That's a good point.
And like I said, this is a good self-own because they say it out loud here. We're going to do this to you because we are the power in the world. And we know what's best for you and the world, by the way.
And to the to the title, back to the title here is, why is she saying this flat out? There is no attempt. So because she said that flat out to him, I was waiting for the but. I was waiting for the, but I can't do that because, or
Well, they
or even a, but maybe you can convince me not to, or
this is this
anything.
is this is needed for the setup of the end of the episode, though. So yeah, there's no die as the mar here. It's just you needed this
Yes.
monologue for the end of the episode, which is her following up on it,
You're,
realistically.
you're also borrowing trouble again because you're either not going to have the tower split, or you're going to have a really damn hard time doing any of the subtleties of the tower schism. Because one of the reasons the tower break works in the books, and one of the reasons there is an opposition to Elida, it's not just personality. It's not just, you know, you're a bitchy red and we don't like you. It's there's enough gray area there that Sawan has a case to make that she should not have been deposed and not have been stilled. In this world, for whatever reason, they decided that there is a firm, hard written law of what the Amarillan is supposed to do when the dragon is reborn.
Well, again, this is combining things though, because this was Elida's view for
Yep.
handling Rand.
Yep.
And they put that on Sawan, but then they had this stupid love story in the process. And I have a feeling down the road, Sawan's going to do something to be a good guy again, because you can't do that to a girl in these shows. So it's we'll see if the predictable woke writing comes through. And then we get to Matt and Ishi and the brewing of the shrooms, the psychedelics. But we'll get to that when he actually drinks it. It's because this scene is kind of him just telling him that
before we get to that, I've got a little mini rant here. Why is Loyal so
be quick? I'm
dumb?
getting on short time though. So
why is Loyal so dumb? He
really?
says
I forgot this scene.
When he runs into nine, he just
what
a coincidence. He just runs into Nine Even Elaine and says, the daughter heir, and drops to a knee in the middle of a crowded market.
Yeah, okay.
And nobody notices. Why is he so stupid?
Because he's a guy.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
All right, but moving along with your notes, where do you want to go
Okay,
to?
so yeah, we'll go back over the brewing of the tea when he actually drinks it, but then we get to the Avienda meeting her toe with her friends that she finds, her maidens she finds in the desert that happens to exist out in the middle of nowhere, which they actually, I guess Falm is supposed to be in a desert here because the camel's going into the town here in a little bit too. But okay, say what you want. We kind of talked about this when we were watching it together, and you were right. It was the meeting of Toe, but two things.
Yeah.
First of all, this is very, very, very inconsistent to just pull in a scene from later so we can skip over it later. She explains it to Perrin. It was her toe because she defended herself and someone died. Maidens didn't have toe because someone else died in battle while they were fighting together. That is not a source of toe.
It's a warrior. You've already established it's a warrior society.
They would have made the everybody wakes from the dream comment
exactly
at that point.
Exactly.
And so that tells you that whoever wrote this scene had no clue about the books at all. They all talk about how they love the source material. This person who wrote this scene, or these people who wrote this scene, and the actresses and actors that played in this scene have no clue about the source material, or this scene wouldn't have even existed. And then add to the fact that it existed, again, back to fighting. Why do you throw a Superman punch when someone's not defending themselves? A Superman punch is a fake kick so you can land the punch. If someone's not defending themselves, why are you faking a kick? Because it looks cool.
Because it looks cool.
Because it looks cool.
While we're asking questions, why does Perrin not interfere just because some rando he just met says don't?
Yeah.
That's where
Avienda should have said don't. Yeah.
She should have said, while we're asking questions, why is Hopper going nuts and barking? It Avienda's not part of his pack, and why is he just barking? He's not a dog, he's a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't he
And why
acting?
are these wolves so freaking small?
Well, because it's hard to get an actual wolf. Yeah, it bothers me when that was one of the thoughts I had. I don't know if I said it out loud that uh, people don't understand how scary wolves are because they think they're a husky.
Yeah.
They are not. That's just what movies and TV shows use because they look similar to a wolf and they're trainable.
See, there would be scenes where I would be cool with like real wolves being in there, but then also like when you have the interaction where it would be dangerous for an actor or actress, I would be okay with CGI that even you could tell a CGI there just to have the fact that it's an actual wolf and not this husky looking thing that's actually probably smaller than my dogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the Oklahoma City Zoo has a couple of wolves in the Oklahoma exhibit because there used to be, and I think there may still be some wolves there in certain parts of Oklahoma now. But and these wolves aren't that big because of the variety of wolf that they are. Um, but you can still see how big they are because right next to the wolves is another enclosure that has coyotes. And coyotes are much more dog-like. They are much
Mm-hmm.
more like what Hopper is here. And so when you can see them side by side, then you get an idea of, oh man, that's big. And consider that, timber wolves are even bigger. Um,
Uh,
yeah, I could rant about this scene all day. So let's move on to whatever you have
yeah.
next.
Well, we get to Matt's trip. So now they go back to Matt and he drinks the tea right at the 15 minutes. And this is the true WTF moment of it all because it's the same freaking one from episode 1. It's his mom showing up in the trip and saying, "You're just like your father, who was just like his 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 father." So, first, quit hating on Abel. Abel was a good man. Second, reincarnation is not tied to your family. Case in point, Lews Theron could not be reincarnated because he killed all his kin.
That's a good point. I didn't even catch
Rant
that one.
over.
the the rant I was going to have is so when we were watching this and when we were watching this live, your thought was, wait, is this how they're going to give Matt his memories? Because they didn't use the portal stone. We don't know if they're going to bother to use the doors or not. So the other lives and the memories and all that. That's what Ishii said was going to happen, but that's not even remotely what happened.
No, you were a horrible person in your past life. And then the life before that, you hung yourself, you drowned a man, you killed a person, da 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 da. That was what it was. It's going down this stupid storyline of I already have Matt because he's inherently evil.
And the whole point of the portal stones was that as Matt is kind of shaking and tears in his eyes, is that's not who I am. It shook him because he knows my interpretation of the reason it shook him in that moment is because he knows he can kind of be an a-hole, but he's also a good and decent person and a loyal friend.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why his reaction to that is I wouldn't,
Because even though he was a rascal, he had a good father and a good mother and good friends. And yeah, he was mischievous. He wasn't evil.
mhm, yeah, yeah. Uh,
And then we get to Lanfear again, which is where we get the high lace leather boots. That was kind of hot, but nothing really memorable about that scene except that she just says, "I thought you were going to leave," and he gives all the excuses that way he couldn't, and asks for help, and gets exactly the help you would expect from asking one of the most evil people in the world to
yeah.
help you. It
Why
was
why
cheaply done, but it reminded me of that scene with the in Monty Python where the wizard is going, "Grr, brr," and it was just random like fireworks going off. Yeah, that was kind of
um why would you ask her when just before that scene you had Moiraine down there and yeah, it's kind of dumb that she's in the cells too, but whatever. You had Moiraine down there talking to him. So he knows that it's not hopeless. He knows Moraine is going to try and help him, going to try and get him out, is going to figure something out. And instead, he asks one of the Forsaken to come help me. Okay. And what does she do? Well, she goes through the foregate, murdering people and setting it on fire. Well, now you've got a couple of problems here because one, Rand is a freaking idiot, which you've already established, but whatever. But two, if they are willing and able to do this, why don't they just do it all the time? Because you're just showing how invincible the Forsaken are. So now
Mm-hmm.
you've created a big effing problem of why are they subtle? Well, there's a reason in the books because despite all their power, they're still human. So they still have egos, they still have foibles, they still have weaknesses, and they can still be killed by getting shot in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, more realistic here is if he had said something in that sequence to get her pissed off. And
Mm,
that would have been the Lanfear we know and love, that she got pissed off and started blowing shit up.
yeah.
But what did Lan do in the next one? I have Lan breaking a promise for emotional reasons. Oh, Rafe. What was the next scene?
When he goes to Logain
That's
and he
right. And then he puts
says,
the key down, promises in the key if he tells him what he needs, and then he tells him what he needs, and then he breaks the promise.
and then he takes because he, you know, because of what you did to Steppen is basically what he says.
Yeah.
Because you killed my friend.
You made me twist my nipples, is why he's so
Mhm.
angry. Uh okay, then back to Perrin and Avienda, Toe while defending herself, as we already talked about that.
Yep.
Then there was
You,
a
you,
little quip in there where you're starting to get the feel that you're gonna have a love plot between Avienda and Perrin earlier in that, but then she
uh-huh.
combines Perrin with Gaul by having
Uh-huh.
what Chiad wants to know, but Bane can care less.
Yes. But Bane doesn't want you. But then I don't know. Maybe they'll set it up later, but I don't think they said anything to indicate why that matters because
Nope.
they're sisters.
Yeah,
Uh,
but at this point in the books, you don't know why it matters either. So
true.
that's okay. And you do get some hints that it's there, but you don't know why it matters.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh.
okay. Then we get to Egwene again with Rena.
Mhm.
And this is where Rena is like washing her hands and cleaning her. And she just looks at her and says, Rena, I will kill you.
Yeah.
Which is where we get Egwene the Tyrant again. Because
But also really stupid.
there's a
Why would you
difference
say that
between
out loud?
there's a difference between being defiant and being a murderous tyrant. Something like your people are wrong about us, or I will get out and I will be free one day, something along those lines.
Mhm.
But I'm going to kill you is it's lazy. It's lazy. It's showing you the rage that's building up in her.
And it would have been much more impactful if she would have just kind of glared at her and not said anything.
Yeah,
But to
which
your
is where
point,
I think you're right that they're going to make her kind of like alongside Matt with the rage angle,
mm,
with the evil, like Ishii trying to really talk her into it, which I don't know how we're going to get if Ishii dies in the next episode. So we'll see what happens there.
yeah. Um, do you have any thoughts about what they did with Barthanes here of turning him into Moraine's nephew
Uh,
and then
no,
but still having him be a dark friend and
yeah, I'm confused how they're going to use him because it almost seems like a pointless part of the whole thing
yeah, it
because
does
he
seem
ends
like it
up
dead ends there.
yeah, he ends up in jail instead of being a powerful person that can do dark friend things. So I thought they were setting him up to be a powerful person who can do dark friend things, just like in a different timeline than the books go. But then it was like, we're going to have him there. We're going to establish him as this, and then we're going to get rid of him. So that to me is wasted tape when you're trying to condense these books into one thing. Because you could have still had the Anvir made up character relationship with Moraine without having
Mhm.
Barthane's part in that was actually kind of useless by the way they did it all the way through.
It- I think again it was cheap heat because they set him up as this very likable young man in trying to kind of mend the relationship between his mother and his aunt. There,
Mhm.
as he's the one trying to, and so I think what they were trying to do was just cheap manipulation of emotions of, oh, they made you like this guy, and now he turns out to be a dark friend.
Which still would have been better had he turned out to be a dark friend. We found out about it, and then he still married the queen, gained his power, did dark friendly things, helped the bad guys do bad things, and then die or then get caught.
I'm curious to see
He never helps
what
dark friendly
happens
people do
here,
dark friendly things, is the thing.
because they sure make it seem like he just got killed there at the end of this episode when the guards show up, and walk in and he's screaming, and I was thinking, did they just kill him? And I mean,
Parsons?
yeah, your comment was it was much better when a pissed off Tom took him out,
Oh yeah. No, I
because
think I think he was just screaming because he realized that the guards were on her side and not his,
yeah.
and he wasn't getting out. That's how I took
Uh,
that.
uh,
But
and again, I hadn't even thought about this, but back to the freaking title of the episode, Das Diamar, there's no game of houses here. He should have won. If he's been manipulating this all along, because he basically tells his mother, why do you think we're where we're at? It wasn't because of what you did. It was because I made a deal with the devil, because that's
mhm.
what it took to get our family name back. Okay. So, all right. So that's what it took to get our family name back. So then there should have been a double twist there of, mother, uh, why do you think they're on your side? I'm the one who's been pulling the strings all this time, but apparently you weren't. And apparently those strings didn't matter. Um, all right. Then we get to the end here where they go through the ways after the confrontation with, well, even before the confrontation. Um, uh,
Well, this is a spot where I felt like you caught Varen in a direct lie, but Moiraine right afterwards says you're clever with your words. I still think there was a lie there. I don't even think it was twisting the
I
words.
don't know. I don't know how you have any wiggle room there. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the what I said is I think they were trying to mimic the scene in The Great Hunt where she shows up and said that the Amaryllis sent me, or Moraine sent me, I think she says, and she gives this self-satisfied nod because Jordan's not telling you what's going on in her head, but he's giving you the impression that she has come up with a story in her own mind that lets her say this and believe it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plausible deniability, even if it's kind of weak there. I don't see where there's any plausible deniability here.
Then we get Lan as they're escaping to the ways. It'd be one thing to say, I talked to Logain and he said he saw weaves on you.
Mm-hmm.
But then he gives this long speech about what it is and how it works. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like,
How do you
no,
know all this?
how do you know all this? Even the
Um,
Lan who was wise in the books, much wiser
but
than the one here, wouldn't have known that.
how the hell do you know all this? And Moraine nor any other Aes Sedai says this seems off. Something's not right here.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and again, within the context of the show, they already showed you what happens when a warder bond is broken forcibly. And that's not what's happening here. And in fact, there's a kind of a brief comment earlier in the season about that, about how this isn't right. It's, I don't feel like I should if the bond's been broken. And I thought there was even a comment about passing the bond. So you're not making any sense, and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to have it both ways. And so all you've done is make a giant mess here that is utterly nonsensical. But then you are once again undermining that god awful scene of Rand getting bitch slapped and not fighting back and falling to his knees after he was told to face it like a man. Is, if Rand is already so in control of the power that he can grab the source at will, which at this point in the books he couldn't, he can grab the source at will, and he can wield it with enough power and dexterity. That was something that was brought up in the books, and there's a little bit of a moment here, kind of a comment of, if you don't do this just right, you could kill her.
Mm-hmm. Or
And
still her.
one,
Or yeah.
yeah, and so one, why does Lan have that much faith in Rand and his ability already at this point? And two, how does Rand already have that much ability? And if he does, if he is able to do that, and he does have that ability because we see him do it, so then why was he a limp fish with the Amarillan?
Because when you need it, it will happen. Believe in yourself. That's the main message.
Yeah.
And then we get the actual only thing that can be set up with the freaking stupid love story between Moiraine and Swan, which is the betrayal of using the compulsion of the oath rod on her. The only thing that sets up is this, to have any kind of emotional reaction. And still, it was so obviously, it was so blunt, it had no effect.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's also supposed to set up something where Swan redeems herself later, but that's because they can't let they can't let a good girl be bad and have a flaw. And we got to wind this up because I've got school here.
Yeah. Well, with how much awfulness was in that episode 7, I am looking forward to to episode 8, which I believe will be the finale. And oh boy, I can't wait. It's gonna be fun.
My take on the whole season 2 compared to season 1 is could have been worse.
Could have been worse.
They set up where there was a kind of a funnel of things that could happen, and it could have got better, or it could have got worse, and it's ended up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and it kind of doesn't matter because you were so terrible in the first season. Because I don't remember whose numbers these are, but what. And it's hard to get numbers on streaming services, but it looks like the audience for season 2 is about half of what the audience for season 1 was. And that's your own damn fault.
But by the ratings, you could tell who's doing the ratings never read the books, because Rotten Tomatoes is like 82%. And that's the audience score.
Ugh.
So yeah. They got their wish of getting a new audience. The problem is, I think that half is because they lost all the old audience.
Yeah. Well,
the half that's left is all new audience.
I referenced Ahsoka earlier, and that's what Disney Star Wars is doing, is they still have a very rabid fan base, but that base has been shrinking dramatically because of all the crap that you've been putting out. So I'll be interested to see, because we've kind of had some thoughts and postulations on what they might be setting up and where things might go. So we'll see next week when we do this again for episode 8 of how many of those awful things came true and how many new awful things did they surprise us with.
All right, that's all I've got.
All right, well, we will see y'all then, and we will get back to Good Wheel of Time on Friday with some more Winter's Heart.
All right, and we should be back on schedule from here on out. We had those couple weeks where I was gone and traveling, and
I had internet issues.
Yeah, and then internet issues, and everything went bad, and hopefully everything went bad at once, and it stopped raining, and we can start going.
All right,
see you later.